All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe Imbriano, the Fullerton Informer, coming to you live from the streets of sunny Southern California. Today is Monday, January 31st, 2022, the last day of January in this 2022, and we're under a heavily chemtrailed sky here, folks, where the atmospheric river is being diverted up to the north and down below us, coming up through the Gulf of Mexico, so they can continue creating this bomb cyclone in the northeast, because all of the moisture and the weather is being bypassed and carried over the continental divide, so the storms have twice the punch. This is a subtropical flow. The sky actually looks like it would in Puerto Vallarta in the summer or in the late fall in Southern California, folks. This is subtropical moisture that's being doused with metallic nanoparticles, so they can continue to desiccate this area. And of course, that keeps the climate change model, mantra, and narrative solidly bolstered for the continued draconian legislation drafting and passing to lock us down even further into their Agenda 2030 population reduction by making the entire society carbon neutral. I want to talk to you about that, folks. That's really important that you understand what carbon neutral means. You see, there is a fallacy that carbon emissions affect the weather. And it is a fallacy that is developed by the educational system's brainwashing, that plant food actually makes the weather change. Folks, this is what makes the weather change, folks. When they spray the sky, that's how they change the weather, okay? The weather is changed by changing the atmospheric composition and the electrostatic charge of the atmosphere. That's how it's done, folks. By doing so, the atmosphere is heated and desiccated. And what happens is, the moisture fields that come through are not allowed to rise and cool and condense and turn into precipitation. They actually just get carried away from west to east. And when they end up in places that come in contact with more moisture fields, whether it be the Gulf of Mexico or the Great Lakes, and then you combine that with extreme temperatures, you have extreme weather. It's not very difficult, folks. But I want to talk to you about the carbon issue. The carbon issue is the biggest bunch of literal baloney you'll ever lay before your very eyes, folks. The more CO2 that's in the atmosphere, the better the trees grow, all right? And the faster they grow. If you have ever had an experience growing boysenberries or blackberries or olala berries, the more water you put in the muck, the better the plant does, okay? The plant will eventually suck all the water up, and if it's growing in a swamp, which what these things like to grow in, then it will grow like crazy, okay? The faster it can photosynthesize, uptake the water, and produce more stalk, leaves, and fruit. That's exactly what happens with carbon emissions, folks. Now, there are a lot of discussions about carbon sequestration and how they're pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, folks. And they're spending a lot of money to do it, and they're only getting a teeny amount of carbon out of the atmosphere. And that's not because they're trying to lower the atmospheric carbon levels, but they're actually sequestering the CO2 so they can use it in their underground facilities for growing plants and other chemical processes that are taking place in these underground facilities. So all this talk of how they're sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere and pumping it into the ground, they're telling you the truth. They're just not telling you the truth about why they're doing it. Because you see, folks, in the underground facilities, in order for them to grow plants, they need CO2. They got to bring it in from somewhere. So they can convince all these governments to lay down all these tens of billions of dollars to allegedly stop this climate change hoax by pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere and condensing it and putting it into these underground facilities. That's exactly what they're doing, ladies and gentlemen. Now, carbon neutral is a very big problem, because that means that for every breath you take, that means there has to be an equal and opposite reaction of pulling the carbon out of the atmosphere. You see, folks, the largest source of carbon emissions are human beings. Now, every breath you take, in goes oxygen and some other inert atmospheric gases, but out goes carbon dioxide and water vapor, because those are the products of aerobic respiration. That's what your body runs on. That's the metabolism of fats and carbohydrates. Now, of course, you pull electrons from the earth, and in some cases even from the atmosphere, that aids in the electron transport chain's supply of energy. It's not just from food, folks. Your body can actually live off of earthing. That's how you can go without food for quite some time, folks. The source of electrons can be flipped on and off. You don't need food to survive all the time. You got to eat, obviously, but you don't have to eat 5 times a day. That's a con job that they've pushed on us to make us sick and kill us. But this carbon neutral nonsense, folks, for every breath you take, that means somebody else is going to stop breathing. When we get to the point where they've actually convinced you that carbon neutral is the way to save this so-called plane that they call a planet, then they've got you, folks, because they're going to take away the fire, they're going to take away the internal combustion engine, they're going to take away your natural gas stoves, they're going to take away the natural gas power plants, the coal-burning power plants, the oil-burning power plants, your ability to travel, because they'll be able to shut off all these electric cars with the push of a button anytime they want, folks. Those things are all remote controllable. Okay, there's nothing like, and they don't want you having a generator, they don't want you having a backup power supply, they want you being totally dependent, right? Because that's their plan. You need to understand that what's behind this climate change hoax agenda has nothing to do with saving the earth. It has everything to do with getting rid of us, getting rid of industries, getting rid of food production. Did you know a lot of the products that go into agriculture emit carbon? Did you know that even the animals emit CO2? They belch methane. They breathe out CO2. You know the animals that turn grass into ribeye? Did you know that they have this thing called a foregut and a rumen, and there is a degradation of the amylose and cellulose in these animals' organs, these pouches that actually produce a lot of methane, folks. Did you know they call methane a climate change greenhouse gas, right? Every time you rip one, that comes out. Folks, the cows belch methane. They don't want you eating beef because the beef is loaded with iron, and the iron protects you against all the microwave and millimeter wave towers that they're putting in, that they're going to turn on and zap you with. It has nothing to do with what you're being told, folks. You see, where I live in Fullerton, they call my community the education community. And, you know, I don't know how I ended up on my street, folks, but I am surrounded by some of the most weaponized idiots you'll ever meet. They're educated morons, all right? In my neighborhood, you have all these people, you know, on my street, on all the other streets. They all work for the college, or they all work for the high school, or they all work for elementary school, they all work for the junior college, or they all work for the government, okay? All of them are on the doles, and all of them are in on everything, and they don't want to hear it. They don't want any part of exposing anything. They want to go along and wax their fancy cars, right? That's all they care about. Now, the hilarious thing is when the recycling truck comes on trash day, it clinks like a barroom trash bin, right? But that's how they deal with their guilt, folks. But the point I'm getting at is this system is not in the business of being a benevolent brother or sister to you and your offspring. This system is predatory. And this system is a systematic mind control brainwashing, dumbing down, outcome-based assembly line that turns out a bunch of people that can't think and that believe everything they're told so that they can have their way with all of you. And they will actually get you to believe some of the most ridiculous, mindless nonsense that has the utmost horrific ramifications. All right? It's unbelievable how they've gotten us to this point, ladies and gentlemen, where we literally believe, let me rephrase that, where you literally believe everything you see on a screen and everything you read in a magazine. You know, it's funny about how they have these journalism degrees, and yet, you know, there's no such thing as journalism anymore. Get a load of this, by the way. Let's line up, right? What a fraud that is. So this carbon emissions thing, if you know anybody that is into hydroponics, aquaponics, or even greenhouse farming, they will tell you that introducing CO2 into the atmospheric conditions of a closed system will increase tremendously the yield, right? So we know CO2 is plant food, and we know that you know, running cars and breathing out carbon dioxide after running a couple of miles, or, you know, having a cow or a pig or a chicken is not a criminal act, but they're trying to make it into that, folks. And they want you eating all this vegetarian fake meat that's made, I mean, folks, I kid you not, this, you know, this, I can't believe it's not meat type stuff. You know, this plant-based protein is toxic.